Imagine being asked to play the most famous human being who ever lived. Not a president, not a war hero, not a fictional superhero. Michael Jackson. The man whose moonwalk stopped traffic, whose albums didn't just top charts, they redefined what charts meant, whose face was so recognized that he had to wear a mask just to walk through an airport. Now imagine you're not just asked to play him, you're his nephew. You share his blood. You grew up hearing stories about him at the dinner table. You watched the world mourn him when you were just a child. And now, at 28 years old, you're standing on a Hollywood soundstage in a red military jacket, a single glove on your left hand, and the entire legacy of the King of Pop resting on your shoulders. That is the reality Jaafar Jackson walked into. And whether the film around him deserved him or not, that's exactly what we're here to find out today. Welcome back to Pulsecast USA. I'm Alina. The Michael Jackson biopic, simply titled Michael, is finally here after years of development, after a writer's strike, after legal battles, after script rewrites, after reshoots, after a budget that reportedly ballooned to $200 million. It premiered in Berlin on April 10th, 2026. It hit US theaters on April 24th in IMAX. And the response? Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. Critics praised Jaafar Jackson's performance, but called the story sanitized. Fans are divided, the Jackson family is divided, and the conversation around this film has reopened every debate about Michael Jackson's life, legacy, and the stories we choose to tell and not tell about icons. So today, we are doing the full breakdown. The making of the film, the casting, the controversy, the script changes, the family drama, the actual movie itself, what it got right, what it got wrong, and whether a film this complicated can ever truly honor a man this complicated. This is going to take a while. Get comfortable. Let's start at the very beginning. The story of this movie starts not in Hollywood, but in a boardroom in November 2019. Producer Graham King, the man behind Bohemian Rhapsody, secured the rights to produce a film about Michael Jackson. Screenwriter John Logan was attached to write. Now, Graham King producing a music biopic? That made sense. Bohemian Rhapsody made over $900 million worldwide. The man knew what he was doing with a rock legend's life story. But Michael Jackson is not Freddie Mercury. Michael Jackson is not Elton John. Michael Jackson is not any artist whose life can be packaged neatly into 2 hours and sent out with an Oscar campaign. Michael Jackson is the most famous human being in modern history, and his life, his extraordinary, brilliant, troubled, complicated, deeply contested life defies any attempt at a simple narrative. King said in interviews that he had interviewed hundreds of people who knew Jackson in preparation, that he wanted to, and I love this quote, humanize but not sanitize the story. That ambition? Admirable. Whether the final film achieved it? That's the question we're going to spend the next 30 minutes unpacking. In February 2022, Lionsgate officially announced the film. Global distribution rights, big studio backing. This was going to be a major production. In January 2023, director Antoine Fuqua signed on. Now, Antoine Fuqua, Training Day, The Equalizer, Southpaw. This is a filmmaker who is not afraid of darkness, who is not afraid of moral complexity, who can handle a story that doesn't have clean heroes and clean villains. On paper, he was the perfect choice. And then came the casting question that everyone was asking. Who plays Michael Jackson?
This was always going to be the most scrutinized casting decision in Hollywood history. Full stop. You cannot overstate the difficulty of this. Michael Jackson was not just a performer. He was a visual icon. Every movement, every expression, every vocal inflection burned into the collective memory of billions of people across multiple generations. Get it wrong, and you have a disaster, a caricature, an insult to a legacy. Get it right, and you have something genuinely historic. The casting process took 2 years. 2 years of searching, auditioning, screen testing. And when the announcement came, it was not what anyone expected. Jaafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, son of Jermaine Jackson, 28 years old at the time of filming. No major film credits. This would be his debut. The immediate reaction was divided. Some people thought it was inspired. Who better to capture the essence of Michael Jackson than someone who literally shares his DNA, who grew up in that family, who absorbed that energy and those mannerisms from childhood? Others were skeptical. A first-time actor carrying a $200 million production on his debut, playing the most iconic performer in history? But then, the trailer dropped in November 2024, and it became the most viewed trailer for any musical biopic or concert film in history. Not most viewed that month, not most viewed that year, in history. Because when people saw Jaafar Jackson on screen, something happened. Something that's hard to explain if you haven't seen it. He doesn't just look like Michael. He doesn't just move like Michael. There's something in the eyes, something in the way he holds a moment, something that goes beyond imitation into something that feels like memory, like inheritance. Michael's own mother, Catherine Jackson, approved the casting. She said Jaafar embodies her son. That is not a small thing. But not everyone in the family was on board.
Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris Jackson, had no involvement in this film, and she made her feelings known. She described an early version of the script as sugar-coated. She pointed out, correctly, that Hollywood biopics frequently shape narratives and contain inaccuracies that serve the story more than the truth. But her most explosive move was a legal filing. Paris filed against the executors of the Michael Jackson estate, John Branca and John McClane, over the casting of Miles Teller as attorney John Branca. Her argument? That bringing in a high-profile Hollywood actor for that role risked estate assets unnecessarily. But she went further. She accused Branca of seeing himself as, quote, central to the Michael Jackson story, and of using the film to, quote, enrich and aggrandize himself. Now, that is a significant accusation against the man who has managed the Jackson estate since Michael's death in 2009, against the man who has final say over how Michael Jackson's legacy is presented to the world. Paris also described herself as someone who was simply trying to protect her father's image and her family's truth from a version of events she didn't recognize. Michael's siblings Janet, Randy, and Rebby also do not appear in the film. According to LaToya Jackson, Janet kindly declined to be included. When major members of the Jackson family are either absent from or actively opposed to a biopic about their most famous member, that tells you something. Something important about the gap between the official version of Michael Jackson's story and the full version. And that gap is nowhere more visible than in what the film decided to leave out. This is the part of the story that I think matters most. And I want to be careful here because it involves serious allegations that were never proven in court and a legal and ethical landscape that is genuinely complicated. So let me walk you through what we know, factually. Early versions of the Michael script included references to the 1993 child sexual abuse allegations against Jackson. According to reports in Variety, one version of the script actually opened with those allegations, beginning in medias res in 1993, with Jackson staring at his reflection as police arrived at Neverland Ranch. The third act of that version dealt directly with the impact of those allegations on Jackson's life and career. Producer Graham King had said he wanted to present the story in an unbiased way. Actor Coleman Domingo, who plays Joseph Jackson, said the film wasn't trying to prove his innocence, but was trying to give a great examination of an artist, for you to leave with your own answers. That is an ambitious goal, and a noble one. But then, something happened that changed everything. A clause was discovered in a legal settlement with one of Jackson's accusers, Jordan Chandler, that forbade any mention of Chandler in film. And as a result, all references to the allegations were removed from the script. The entire third act was revised. The film now ends before the first allegations arose, with Jackson beginning the Bad Tour in 1988. Director Antoine Fuqua addressed the allegations directly in interviews, expressing personal skepticism, saying sometimes people do some nasty things for some money. Dan Reed, director of the 2019 documentary Leaving Neverland, had read a leaked version of the earlier script and said he was initially astonished that the estate had the confidence to address the allegations directly, but he also said the script contained outright distortions. The result is a film that covers Michael Jackson's life from 1966 to 1988. That's 22 years out of a 50-year life and career. The Thriller era, the Bad era, the Jackson 5, the family tensions, the early solo career. All of it told, but the second half of his life, essentially, is absent. Whether that makes the film incomplete or simply focused depends entirely on what you believe the purpose of a biopic should be.
Let me tell you about the making of this film, because the production story is almost as dramatic as the story on screen. Principal photography was originally scheduled to begin in mid-2023, 80 days of filming in Santa Barbara, California, a projected spend of $120 million. Then, the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike hit, filming was delayed. Cameras finally rolled on January 22nd, 2024, wrapped May 30th, 2024. But then the script changes happened. The Jordan Chandler settlement clause was discovered, the rewrites began. Delayed further when screenwriter John Logan's house was damaged in the devastating Palisades fire. Reshoots took place in June 2025, 22 days of additional filming, a completely new ending. Reports suggested this added anywhere from $10 million to $50 million to the budget, depending on which source you believe. Lionsgate denied reports that the film was in chaos. The final budget landed somewhere around $200 million. The runtime? Originally 4 hours. There were reports it might be split into 2 separate films. It was ultimately cut to 3.5 hours for theatrical release, with approximately 30% of the original cut potentially repurposed for a future film or sequel. The film's release date moved twice, from April 2025 to October 2025, to its final April 24, 2026 release date. And the visual effects work, provided by Industrial Light and Magic and several other major studios, was extensive. Recreating the Thriller era, the Pepsi commercial accident, Wembley Stadium during the Bad Tour, all of it built with painstaking detail. This was not a small undertaking. This was one of the most ambitious and complicated productions in recent Hollywood history. The question was always, did the result justify all of it? Let's talk about what's actually in the movie. The film opens in 1966. Joseph Jackson, played by the magnificent Coleman Domingo, assembles his 5 sons into the Jackson 5. Michael, the youngest, on lead vocals. And from the very first scene, the film establishes its central tension. Not between Michael and the public, not between Michael and the allegations, but between Michael and his father. Joseph Jackson is the engine of this story, the disciplinarian, the man who drove his children to greatness through a combination of love, ambition, and methods that left lasting wounds. Coleman Domingo plays him with extraordinary nuance. He is not a cartoon villain. He is a man who genuinely believed he was building something, who saw his son's talent and knew what it could become, and was terrified of wasting it, but whose methods, the pressure, the control, the discipline, left marks that never fully healed. The film follows Michael's journey, from those early grueling rehearsals through the Jackson 5's rise to Motown stardom, through the move from Gary, Indiana to a mansion in Encino, California, and then the pivot. Michael signing with Epic Records in 1978, the Off the Wall album, Quincy Jones, and then Thriller. The Thriller sequences are stunning. The recreation of the music video, the recreation of the scene where Michael and his attorney John Branca walk into CBS Records and essentially demand that MTV play Black artists. There is a version of this film that is exhilarating, that reminds you, regardless of everything else, what an astonishing creative force Michael Jackson was. The Pepsi commercial accident is handled with care. The moment where pyrotechnics set Michael's hair on fire, causing third-degree burns and nerve damage. The film shows this as a turning point, a moment that changed him physically and, the film implies, began a long and painful relationship with painkillers. The family dynamics are richly drawn. Nia Long as Katherine Jackson brings warmth and quiet strength to a role that could easily have been underwritten. And Jaafar Jackson, at the center of all of it, is genuinely remarkable.
I want to spend real time on this, because whatever your feelings about the film's choices, about what it included and what it left out, the performance at its center deserves to be discussed seriously. Jaafar Jackson had never made a film before this one. He was handed the most daunting acting assignment in recent Hollywood memory. And what he delivers is not an impression. It is not a tribute act. It is not a costume and a glove and a moonwalk. It is something closer to channeling. There are moments in this film, quiet moments, not the big performance sequences, where Jaafar captures something about Michael Jackson's inner life that is genuinely moving. The vulnerability, the loneliness, The way someone can be surrounded by thousands of screaming fans and still feel profoundly, achingly alone. The performance sequences are extraordinary. The recreation of the Thriller era is technically impressive and emotionally alive. But what strikes me most is the in-between moments. The scenes where Michael is just sitting, thinking. The scenes where you can see him processing. His father's control, his own ambition, his own sense of self, his own face in the mirror. Jaafar carries those moments with a maturity and depth that is remarkable for any actor, let alone a first-time performer. Critics largely agreed on this point even while criticizing the film around him. The word sanitized appeared in review after review, but almost every review contained a version of the same sentence. Jaafar Jackson is extraordinary. And his grandmother Catherine said he embodies her son. I don't think there is higher praise available.
Let's give credit where it's genuinely due, because Michael does several things very well. The music. Obviously, this is a film about the greatest pop musician in history, and it treats the music with reverence and joy. The sequences built around Beat It, Billie Jean, Thriller, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, these are alive. They remind you why this music still sounds like the future even 40 years later. The father-son dynamic. The relationship between Michael and Joseph Jackson is the emotional spine of this film, and it is handled with real complexity. Joseph is not a monster, and Michael is not simply a victim. They are two enormously strong-willed people who loved each other and hurt each other and could never quite find a way to exist together without the music mediating everything between them. The scene where Michael fires Joseph, by fax, through his attorney, is simultaneously funny and devastating. The Motown era. The early Jackson 5 sequences are joyful and energetic and beautifully shot. You feel the electricity of a family discovering that one of their own has something the world has never quite seen before. The isolation of fame. The film captures something true and painful about what it means to be that famous. Michael Jackson could not walk down a street, could not shop, could not exist in public without being consumed. The film doesn't sensationalize this, it just shows it, quietly, persistently, as the background radiation of his entire existence. The Pepsi accident, handled with sensitivity and correctly identified as a turning point, not just physically, but in terms of how Michael related to his own body and his own pain. And now, the harder conversation. Because Michael makes a choice, a deliberate, conscious, legally and commercially motivated choice to tell only part of the story. The film ends in 1988 with the Bad Tour at Wembley Stadium, Michael at the peak of his powers. And then, nothing. No Dangerous, no History, no Neverland in its full complexity, no 1993, no 2003, no Trial, no Acquittal, no Invincible, no Final Years, no This Is It, no June 25th, 2009. A man lived 50 years. This film shows us 22 of them. Now, I understand the legal constraints. The Jordan Chandler settlement clause was real. It limited what could be shown. But even within those constraints, the film makes choices that lean toward reverence over complexity. The rhinoplasty is mentioned. Michael undergoes a nose job, feeling insecure about his appearance. But the deeper question of Michael Jackson's relationship with his own body, his own skin, his own face, a question that was central to who he became and how the world perceived him, is barely touched. The racial dimension of his story, the significance of a black artist demanding that MTV, which at the time played almost exclusively white artists, give him airtime, is in the film, but it could have been explored with so much more depth. The loneliness, the eccentricity, the Neverland years, the children's hospital visits, the chimp, the hypobaric chamber, the masks, all absent. Paris Jackson called an early script sugar-coated, and while I don't know exactly which version she read, I understand what she means about the finished film. There is a version of Michael Jackson's story that is more honorable to him precisely because it is more honest, because it shows a human being of extraordinary gifts and genuine flaws and real wounds and real complexity. This film shows us the gifts, it gestures at the wounds, and it largely stops there. So how has the world responded? Critical reception? Mostly negative, but with important asterisks. The consensus is consistent. Jaafar Jackson is praised almost universally. The music sequences are praised. The production design and cinematography, stunning. The performances from Coleman Domingo and Nia Long, excellent. But the story itself, the choices made about what to include and what to omit, that's where critics have pushed back hard. Words that appear again and again in reviews: sanitized, hagiographic, incomplete, reverent to a fault. One common thread: the feeling that the film was made by the Michael Jackson estate for the Michael Jackson estate, that it serves the legacy more than it interrogates it. And box office? The first trailer, as I mentioned, became the most viewed trailer for any musical biopic in history. The interest was massive. Opening weekend gross? $31 million. For a $200 million film, that is a difficult start. Now, it is early. The film is 3.5 hours long, which limits the number of daily screenings. Word of mouth will matter enormously. International markets, where Michael Jackson's popularity remains extraordinary, may tell a very different box office story. But the gap between the trailer's record-breaking viewership and the opening weekend numbers suggests something. That the conversation around Michael Jackson is enormous. But that conversation, and the controversy around the film's choices, may have given some audiences pause. I want to step back from the film itself for a moment, because I think Michael raises a question that goes beyond this one movie. How do we tell the stories of people who were both extraordinary and deeply complicated? Michael Jackson gave the world music that will outlast all of us. Thriller is the best-selling album in history. His influence on pop music, on dance, on music video as an art form, on the entire global entertainment industry is incalculable. He was also a person who spent decades at the center of some of the most serious and contested allegations imaginable. Allegations that were never proven in court. Allegations that some people believe completely and others reject completely, and most people sit somewhere in the complicated middle of. A film that pretends the second part doesn't exist isn't fully honoring the first part either. Because Michael Jackson's greatness, his art, his drive, his vision, existed alongside and in tension with everything else. The isolation, the trauma, the eccentricity, the accusations, the acquittal, all of it. The most honest tribute to a complicated person is a complicated portrait, and Michael, for all its genuine strengths, ultimately chose the safer path, which is a shame, because Antoine Fuqua is a filmmaker capable of so much more, because Jaafar Jackson gave a performance that could have carried a far more demanding film, because Michael Jackson, whatever you believe about him, deserves a story told in full. Maybe the sequel will go there. Lionsgate has said they're not ruling it out. 30% of the original cut could be repurposed. The story of 1993 through 2009 is still out there, waiting. So, after all of that, what is Michael? It is a technically magnificent, emotionally engaging, visually stunning, musically joyful, and ultimately incomplete portrait of one of the most extraordinary human beings who ever lived. It is worth watching for Jaafar Jackson alone. His performance is the kind that comes along rarely, the kind you don't forget, the kind that makes you feel in certain moments like you are watching something real rather than something performed. It is worth watching for the music, for the recreation of an era, for the reminder of what it felt like when Thriller first existed in the world. But go in knowing what it is. It is not the full story. It was never going to be the full story. It is a carefully constructed, legally constrained, estate-approved celebration of the first half of a life that was far more complex than any single film can contain. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's enough for now. Or maybe, as Paris Jackson suggested, Michael Jackson deserves something braver. I'll let you decide. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Have you seen it? What did you think of Jaafar's performance? Do you think the film made the right call leaving out the allegations, or should it have gone further? I read every single comment. I'm Alina. This is Pulsecast USA. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe. We go deeper every single week. I'll see you in the next one.